Care to chat? Hello and welcome to the Northern Ireland Social Care Council's popular podcast, Care to Chat. I'm Wendy Austin and it's my great pleasure to host these podcasts. Real privilege to hear the stories of social care practitioners and social workers and their clients, and to hear too about the many different and important aspects of the work itself. There's a huge range of situations in which they come into play, from domiciliary care to complex areas like criminal justice, from early years to end of life. And I've got to say, hearing about it all has been something of an education for me. And this time we're looking at education in the form of practice teaching as a vital part of the social work professional journey, both when studying and post-qualifying. Once someone qualifies as a social worker, they become part of a professional group with a responsibility to foster and support other social workers. Practice teaching is an opportunity to do just this. It's also an integral part of the delivery of the degree in social work in Northern Ireland. So let's find out more. With me today, Dr Denise MacDermott, Subject Lead in Social Work at Ulster University. Sarah McCarthy, who's practice teacher and social worker in the Community and Voluntary Sector. Northern Ireland Practice Teacher Training Programme candidate Ellen Neill, she's a student practice teacher, and Level 3 student Emily Hill. So let's start with you, Denise and Sarah. What is practice teaching and what are the benefits that it brings to the profession?
Well, for me, practice teaching is the bedrock of social work education in Northern Ireland. If we think that 50% of the social work degree comprises practice learning, or placement as it might be referred to as well, and that's widely acknowledged as the signature pedagogy of the profession. So social work is a practice-based profession and an academic discipline that promotes social change and development. And being a practice teacher in Northern Ireland requires dedication to promoting a culture of lifelong learning, motivation to support, challenge and develop, and also to shape the next generation of social workers in Northern Ireland. What we expect from trainee practice teachers like Ellen and more experienced practice teachers like Sarah and myself is that we are supporting students to become critical thinkers and problem solvers, and recognise that social work is a global profession, because in many ways practice teachers are gatekeepers to the profession.
Sarah, what's your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see practice teachers very much as influencers. If we could take on that label, I think that would be fine in terms of, as Denise said, we have a role to support and assess students who are in placement. The term practice teaching is used specifically in Ireland. I think it's important to note it would be practice educator outside of this land, just so people can identify it. But we are currently practice teachers here, and I think we have that role to support, to assess and to share our learning. Obviously, you can't be a practice teacher without being a qualified social worker and having experience of practice. So we have that responsibility to share that and really to help students to navigate what is a very complex world in social work. And I suppose building confidence and resilience for students as well in a system that is complex and changing itself. So we have that role. Really, the term practice teacher doesn't fully describe or define what we do, but then what job title really does that. Certainly in social work, I'm sure we're all aware of that. So really important, I think, a really important role we take very seriously and can feel very passionate about whenever we see the outcomes for students as they're moving through this system with us.
So Denise and Sarah have both been doing this for quite some time. Ellen, you're a student practice teacher at the moment. Do their descriptions of how it works and what it is that chime with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it summarises it perfectly, particularly what Sarah said. It's about having that support role for students, and that's something, I suppose that's the reason I went into it in terms of doing the programme, is I wanted to support students through what can be a difficult placement. And I suppose in terms of the training programme, it's teaching me that assessment side of things then, because that's not something that I have done before. So yeah, definitely it rings true for me so far.
I mean, you're obviously a busy social worker yourself, and you say you want to support students. So this is kind of bolt-on extra, really. I know it's part of the whole system and part of the kind of integrity of social work, but it's extra work. But what's in it for you?
I suppose that comes down to career development, and that's where our professional and practice framework really comes into it, where there is a structure right from being a student right through your career, that you can make sure that your practice is always evidence informed and you're helping students. So part of that professional and practice framework is having my own career development. I know for me, the likes of learning and development is definitely something that I want to progress towards throughout my career. So that's where practice teaching comes into it, is that starting point.
And Emily, you're very much on the, well, I was going to say on the receiving end of this, but it's much more collegiate than that, really, isn't it? I mean, how has this affected you, Emily, then, in your placements and in your progression? I mean, you're going to do your finals in July and you're hoping to move on from there. What effect has the practice teaching element had on you?
Well, I think for me, practice teachers have been sort of the way to link what I'm learning in university back to what I'm doing on placement. I think without that support, it'd be easy to go through the motions of placement without really understanding why you're doing things. So I think with a good practice teacher, they'll be able to bring what you're doing back to the theory and the values and to the why of behind what you're doing. I think that's been important in shaping me into the kind of social worker I want to be.
And does it help to validate what you're doing? Does it help you to know that you're getting it right and that maybe sometimes a bit of a tweak is required here and there?
Yeah, so for me, practice teachers have been central to what I've been learning on placement. I think they've helped me sort of find my voice and build my resilience and feel more prepared for the realities of social work. And I don't think I'd be here where I am now on my final placement without the support that I've had through both my placements.
And how do you become a practice teacher? I mean, Ellen was saying how she wanted to support students and that she sees that it's an important part of her own professional development. But does everyone want to be a practice teacher, Denise, or are there only some people who feel like doing it, or should more people be involved?
Personally, I think everyone should want to be a practice teacher because it has been such a really positive experience for me in terms of, just like what Ellen was saying, my own learning and developing my career trajectory as well. But essentially, for people who are interested in practice teaching, we're looking that they want to be involved in education and learning and development. So normally you would have someone being in what's called an on-site supervisor role in a placement so that they can develop the skills, their own capacity and their confidence, the evidence being able to support students, and then they would put themselves forward, or their employer would put them forward, would nominate them onto our programme at Ulster University. And it's really a continuum of lifelong learning from that point then, because you're really open, and I'm sure, Ellen, I don't know, feel free to jump in. If you're finding that now as a trainee practice teacher, that dual role where you're responsible for educating and assessing a final year social work student, but you're also learning so much as well from the students. Yeah. And it's challenging and developing professional curiosity.
It is. It's challenging, but I think it helps even yourself as a social worker. You're given constructive feedback on areas that the student can develop, and it's making you then critically think about your own practice and how you work, and you're learning then from just doing it with the student, I suppose.
And I wonder, Sarah, you're in the community and voluntary sector in Extern.
That's right.
Is that a complicating factor? I mean, Denise would say that lifelong learning is a wonderful thing. She's in the university,
It is. It absolutely is.
And Ellen is working in a social work role as well. But if you're working for a community and voluntary sector charity or whatever, are they as keen for people to get involved in something like practice teaching?
Yeah, I think there is a good support from the voluntary sector. We get a number of funded places for across the sector in terms of the practice teaching programme, isn't that right? Yeah. And it's certainly something that would be promoted, and there's a commitment to it. So what that means is we're able to reach people in smaller organisations who maybe want to build and develop their practice learning offering. But they may not have their own practice teacher. So that's where Extern and the team I work in Extern would step in and support that as that is developing and growing, for them to maybe have a member of staff who's completing what Ellen's doing to be able to offer their own. So it's very much about growth and development, and that's certainly the organisation I work for is hugely involved in that and an advocate for that. Yeah, absolutely.
And for you, what do you? I mean, we've heard Ellen talking about what she gets out of it. Well, What do you get out of it? Is it still kind of everyday school day whenever it comes to supporting someone who's maybe quite a lot younger than you, or maybe actually not, given that social workers are all kinds of different ages now?
It's wonderful. That's the challenge. I get to work with people who have left school like the previous year and are on a social work degree. I get to work with people who have taken time out to raise their families or do whatever they've chosen to do at that time and are back in to study social work. Get people who've come from law into social work, people who've come from business into social work. So that kind of... And teaching, I should say, as well, because that was a recent challenge to me very much, thinking there's a teacher here and I'm a practice teacher, so how will this be? But I get I suppose the privilege of being involved in somebody's learning and somebody's learning journey, and when there are struggles, as there are, we manage that together, and we manage it with compassion and with care. And we have, of course, we're working towards standards in terms of our assessment as practice teachers. That's really important. So we have to hold students to account as well. And whenever there are discussions that need to happen around progression, development, we need to have those with integrity. And I suppose I enjoy the challenge of it. I like it when things go a bit wonky, because that's the kind of person I am. And I think because that's social work, we don't expect straight lines of progression. We need to manage the bumps.
Yeah.
When things go a bit wonky, Emily, is it good to have the practice teaching person somewhere nearby that you can go and have a conversation with? Or
Yeah, I think from my experience, one of the most helpful things a practice teacher can do whenever there's something on placement that's not going quite right is for them to be able to create a safe and sort of open environment where I feel that I can actually be honest about what I'm struggling with. I feel like if your practice teacher sort of respects you as a person with challenges sort of outside of placement and on placement, I think it's much more likely that you're able to sort of open up and ask for help whenever you need it.
And have you done that?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
And did it help?
It has helped me a lot, yeah. Being able to go to them about whatever I'm struggling with and know that there's someone there to be able to support me through it.
Because there's some organisations where you'd be nervous about going and having that kind of conversation with someone who was going to do an assessment of you towards the end, wouldn't you? But you felt that was very much encouraged for you to do that.
Yeah, I think it's even just like the qualities of a good social worker is to be, compassionate, respectful, and sort of non-judgmental to your service users. I think it's the same for a practice teacher with students. They need to be sort of understanding of our situations and what we're going through as students, because we're obviously juggling a lot between university and our personal lives and placement as well.
And we've talked about the business of linking what students learn in university to their kind of practice as a social work. And I'm interested in teasing that out a little bit, maybe Denise and Emily, with the two of you. How does it link? How does it kind of form that bridge, or have I interpreted that properly?
No, absolutely. It really starts from the beginning of your professional learning journey as a social work student. All students in Northern Ireland complete a prerequisite module called the Preparation for Practice Learning module. And that's actually co-taught and co-assessed by practice teachers as well from the Community and Voluntary Sector, the Health and Social Care Trust, Probation Board, Education Authority. So that relationship starts from the beginning in terms of working together, managing expectations of the students and supporting the development of professional identity, and crucially exposing students to authentic learning. So it's their first time engaging with people with lived experience. So starting to help students think about how they can develop their interview skills, like what you have said, Emily, in terms of being empathetic in your responses, but also crucially to unpack what does a good social worker look like and starting to model that behaviour. And then that's when Ellen, in her role as a trainee practice teacher, or Sarah and I as seasoned practice teachers, we're then picking up that baton as role models then, and that continuity of authentic learning, and again professional supervision. I don't know, maybe if you want to come on there, Ellen, in terms of professional supervision being a core anchor and requirement of the whole social work placement experience. And
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose that's been a learning for me. I think I mentioned that in terms of my training, it's being able to supervise the student, make sure that their personal well-being is being looked after, and making sure that you're using the supervision not just to make sure they're doing the right actions in terms of their casework, but that they're reflecting on why they're doing it, and they're really linking that back to what they're being taught in the university. And I suppose in terms of the training programme, that's what we're really being taught as part of that. The training programme would cover things like supervision theories, like adult learning theories, to make sure that we're prepared for when the students come to supervise them adequately.
Yeah.
And is that what it felt like, Emily? I mean, did you feel that you were well prepared for how this was all going to work?
Yeah, I think for me, we learn a lot in university about sort of the theories and the models of practice, but it's been through sort of supervision with my practice teachers that I've been able sort of to connect the dots and sort of test my knowledge and see what it looks like in practice. It's one thing to sort of read about the theories or whatever, but it's something else to sort of explore that in real life scenarios with the support of your practice teacher there.
So, Sarah, what kind of qualities does a practice teacher need to have?
I think that they need to be stable, like a tree. Like they need to be the tree, because we're asking students to trust us, to come to us. And I'm thinking we invite students for induction periods, I guess, the 2 kind of placement intake periods. And we have a face-to-face opportunity then to bring people together and really establish that kind of connected community for students. So I would be involved in that as a practice teacher. I think at that time you're very aware that we're assessing the students then, in a sense, that one day, and the students are certainly assessing us in how we're delivering what we're delivering. So you need to be stable. I know that's a very broad term, and there are some days when we're more stable than others, that's for sure. But I suppose it's that sort of consistency, and I guess you've got to sort of resolve and check in with yourself about your own relationship with the profession, how you're feeling, where your kind of joy is within it, and checking in with that so that you're being, and Denise used the word authentic, that we need to be authentic as well in terms of our commitment to the profession, that gatekeeping role, and how we're going to promote the profession. So you need to be stable, you need to look after yourself, you need to think about your own resilience, and you need to be open to hearing different ways of approaching things, different perspectives, I guess. I've been in social work now for over 20 years. That, social work has changed a lot. I'm not in the same place I was 20 years ago in social work, and I'm very mindful of that when I'm working with students and hearing what it's like out there. And I think as practice teachers, you have to hold on to hope in terms of the systems, because we know that things are hard out there. We know they're hard out there for students. We know there's issues with staff shortages, obviously the changes in the world at the minute and the impact on resources as well. So we have to sort of stand steady within that to make sure we're promoting a positive image of the profession, and that is true in supporting the students as they are kind of navigating their way through it.
Denise?
Absolutely, and I think, one of the other things I would add to that list is practice teachers need to have a really good sense of humour, because that keeps you buoyed whenever things are wonky and can go wonky. But that piece as well around understanding the dynamics between a practice teacher and a student, and the significance of that relationship. And maybe at the start, students can sometimes feel a bit unsure, because here's this individual who's engaging with them in professional supervision, who's assessing whether or not they are competent at this point, whether that's your first placement or, in your case, Emily, for your final placement, where you can see graduation, you can see, your post-qualifying career. So that relationship is really central to the placement experience as well. And I'm sure you have found that in your experience with a student, and also being assessed as well, because you're a student as well as assessing a student, so it's very complex.
Exactly.
It is complicated, Ellen, isn't it?
And I think you see that relationship develop throughout the placement. You can get the sense from the very start that the power dynamics are off. The student feels that you're the person in charge, and as you go through supervision with them, that starts to become a bit more even. And certainly as you get to those later stages, you are partners in this, and I think the student feels that a lot more as it gets later. And as you said, Denise, I can certainly sympathise with the students when I'm at this stage. I'm being assessed by my practice assessor in the same way they are as a practice teacher. So you have that shared understanding, I suppose, of what it's like.
And I think that's really good in terms of resetting or recalibrating that power, imbalance, whether that's perceived or real, because then students actually get to provide feedback on their practice teacher as well. So the practice teacher, trainee practice teacher, will have direct observations, the same as what you would have as a social work student. So there's something nice about being able to give some feedback, on how you're developing as well. I think that's really, really important.
Emily likes that bit.
Emily loves that.
I was just wondering, have we left anything out, Emily? Are there any qualities that you think that the practice teachers should have that you haven't come across?
I think everyone's really summed up what the key qualities are. I think the only thing I think it hasn't been addressed enough is when you know that a practice teacher is invested in your learning and that they're going to show up for you, and I don't just mean literally, but also just in terms of their feedback being sent in on time, the engaging in supervision frequently or regularly. It really does help students to feel secure and valued by their practice teacher, which can be quite a daunting learning experience for us. I think it really helps us to stay motivated and engaged in our learning.
Really good point, actually. And Sarah, what is a designated practice learning provider? And how do you become one? How are they supported?
So a designated practice learning provider is an organisation like my organisation, so Extern. So for a larger organisation within Northern Ireland, they can get that status following assessment through NISC to be able to offer practice learning opportunities for students. So we also then within that have associate practice learning providers. So they are, like I mentioned earlier, I think smaller organisations who have maybe expressed an interest in wanting to develop their practice learning offering, and we kind of they become supported under our DPLP umbrella, if that makes sense.
It does,
so
yeah.
really important in how we're growing practice learning opportunities, making sure we're reflecting the diversity, I guess, of need and the changes out there in terms of different services that are maybe smaller and not automatically able to have that DPLP status, but certainly can be supported by a DPLP to pursue that status or indeed maintain that APLP status.
Glad you explained that.
So am I.
It's for someone who comes from outside the profession, it's very collegiate, isn't it? I mean, it's all very well worked out when you look at the way that placements are organised and how it's looked after and so on. When you think of the chaos that there is around, for instance, Emily is hoping she knows where she goes when she qualifies. If you qualify as a junior doctor, you find out a fortnight before and you could be sent to the other end of the country. Somebody said in the last series that social workers really should run the world.
That's a very good point. Do you know what? It's the relationships and the partnerships that have been established over the last 3 decades really have been instrumental in making it such a smooth process. Everybody is working together with finite resources. They have the student experience be as positive and they have parity across that. So whichever pathway that you enter into the profession, that you have access to high quality regulated placements and that you have access to high quality passionate practice teachers and trainee practice teachers as well. So social workers should run the world. Wendy, that's a really good point.
I think we should do a whole podcast.
We should have another podcast on that, absolutely.
Ellen, I wonder, what about students who might struggle with the social work role? I mean, we all have our good days and our bad days and what have you. It's demanding, it's sometimes very emotional and difficult. What have you found as the practice teacher role then?
I think for me that being fully vulnerable here, that's something I struggled with probably even going into the course. It's not something I had faced as an on-site supervisor. The students were excellent. They were excelling for the level that they were at. So I think that goes back to the course. The course hones in on that and teaches you the skills in terms of how you support the student through those difficult periods. But I think it goes back to the whole network that the student has around them. You're not out there on your own as a practice teacher in supporting them. It's being able, I suppose, to pick up what the issues are because you are the one that's there on the day-to-day. But being able to look for support from the likes of Denise in the universities, that if you need it for the student, making sure that they know that there's relationships around them to give them that support.
And what about the practice teachers themselves? I mean, given that they're doing their social work role and they're doing the supervisory role and their assessment and they're being assessed by the student as well, how do they look after their well-being, Denise?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think everybody has their own unique self-care plan, you know, if I can use that phrase, in terms of trying to balance all those spinning plates at one time, because it is a big ask, and I'm sure you've felt that, Ellen, in terms of trying to manage all that, because you're working as a practitioner. You have some workload easement, which is very, you know, to be fair, is very vague because you're a frontline practitioner as well. So I would encourage practice teachers to make time for themselves, so that they don't, I don't want to use the phrase burn out, but that they don't lose that passion, that it doesn't become a chore. You know, that you always see that there's more to learn, you know, being open to those opportunities. For me personally, I took up boxing during COVID, and I find that's an excellent self-care routine for me, and I bought a motorhome. But not everybody can do that, but, you know, I would recommend it.
I think it's an interesting area in terms of support for practice teachers, and certainly sitting beside Ellen, knowing she's involved in the programme and wanting to contribute going forward. I do think we can always improve support for ourselves. I'm fortunate in working with great colleagues. I've met some great people through social work generally and through practice teaching as well. So I suppose, as Denise said, we all have our own ways. But I do think there's something maybe we could be thinking about in terms of coming together as a community of practice teachers more efficiently to kind of share practice and support ourselves. Absolutely. And that's across voluntary sector and statutory sector, I feel, because there's a lot of people, it can be a lonely role. It can be isolating. And I think to acknowledge that and make sure there's support for people coming through like Ellen, and that's something we probably all need to think about as a group of professionals.
Yeah. Now, would that work for you, Ellen?
Yeah, definitely. And I think on an organisational level, in our trust anyway, we have that support in place in terms of they would do the likes of the standardisation events and things like that, so that practice teachers know where they can go for support, but also have a bit of a refresher, I suppose, about what is your role, what is the standards that we expect now. Because practice teachers may have qualified a while ago, and like you say, things can change. The profession changes throughout the years. But going back to what Denise said about self-care, we're trying to support students through a process that's very difficult for them, and we need to make sure that they're looking after their self-care. So I suppose, how can we do that if we're not looking after it for ourselves? So it's just always remembering that no matter how demanding it is, we're, I suppose, our own resource. It's going back to that, and we need to be looked after as well.
How would you encourage other young people like you to actually say, well, I think practice teaching is really important. I'd like to do that.
Well, I think for me, it's first of all practice teachers giving a good experience to students. My desire to become a practice teacher goes right back to being a student and having good experiences of a practice teacher and just thinking straight away, that's what I want to do. So first of all, making sure I'm being a quality practice teacher. And I think it's working with my colleagues to make sure they understand what the role of a practice teacher is, talking to them about that, being honest about the fact that it is demanding and that qualifying is demanding, but that it's worth it on the other end, and explaining the sort of reason that I'm passionate about it and what my career goals would be with it.
You never forget your practice teachers. Like, I qualified 20 odd years ago, and you still remember fondly your practice teachers, because they, just like you had said, Emily, they got you, and they were there for you. They were there to offer support, but they were equally there to challenge you. Particularly about your value base and maybe the decisions that you were making or how you were interacting with particular families. So you never forget those experiences. Kind of stay with you, and that motivates you then to pass that on. It's because it's so integral. Like, it's, when you think about it, it is such a key role educating the future generations of social work in Northern Ireland. Like Emily, you're probably going to be my social worker, so I absolutely want you to be the best that you can be, so that I'll be getting the best level of care and better outcomes. So remember this face.
What do practice teachers mean to you, Emily? I mean, what support have they been able to provide to you, and what difference has it made?
So I think as a student, practice teachers have played a key role in my journey to becoming a social worker. There's someone who's experienced, who gets the pressures off the role and is invested in my development, and it really challenges me to get the most out of the experience. The support they provide, I think it goes beyond just teaching you how to do the job. I've had moments where I've doubted myself, or I wasn't sure that I was getting things right. And it's made a difference having a practice teacher who I could talk things through with. And that kind of reassurance has helped me become more confident in myself.
Your finals are this year. You finish in July, and you're hoping to get a job where you're actually currently doing your placement. You excited about it all?
I am, yeah. I've really enjoyed the placement that I'm currently on. Not just the practice teacher and my on-site, but also just the rest of the team. They've all been really supportive of me and helped me sort of develop my skills. So I am looking forward to getting out and hopefully working in a similar team to them.
And Denise says you never forget your practice teacher. Will you remember yours?
I think I will. I think I'll remember both of them.
Well, that's good. And that's a pretty good basis on which to proceed, isn't it? Ladies, thanks all of you for being here. Denise, Sarah, Ellen and Emily, thanks so much for being here for this episode of Care to Chat. As always, there's more information available on the NISCC website, and there'll be more podcasts released throughout the coming weeks. So to be sure you don't miss one, please do subscribe. They're free, by the way. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate us. And of course, tell all your friends and colleagues.